If you lived in the Detroit area for any length of time, you're probably familiar with Ron Scott. He was a community and political activist who worked tirelessly for the causes he believed in. Ron founded the Detroit Coalition Against Police Brutality and was a co-founder of the Detroit chapter of the Black Panther Party. Ron passed away last week at the age of 68. In addition to his social and political network, he was an early producer and host of this program when it was known as Detroit Black Journal.
For any of you who have been around, say, for the last 25 years in America, then you know that there's been a phenomenon on the scene known as rhythm and blues, and rhythm and blues goes back farther than that. Eventually it goes back 400 years, maybe 1,000 years, depending on whether you look at Africa or America. But there's one person for the last 25 years who has been what you might call a living legend, a person who's done a lot for the business and a person who's done a lot for black culture and for the culture of humanity. And that is James Brown. Good to have you here.
Nice to be here, and hey, I just listened to the opening, and I wonder do I really deserve all that, you know?
I would say so. I would say so. Very, and you know, you can judge that just from the fact that when you walked in the studio, it was like, I don't know, how can you put it? It's like magic. I mean, you know, people just all of a sudden form around you to meet James Brown.
I think one of the things, I've been sincere, and I've been honest with what I had to say. And I'm very glad I didn't get a chance to get a formal education because, like we were talking earlier.
How far in school did you go?
7th grade.
Yeah. Shine shoes, right?
Right.
Worked, did you say one time?
Sawmill, picking cotton, hoeing cotton, working hay.
Hard work.
Yeah, real hard work. Real hard work, you know. I was a juvenile delinquent at the age of 16, and I used to bust rocks and everything. I know the whole thing, and I'm glad I know it, because it gave me, we have a 7th grade education formally, but a doctor's degree in the street. You know? I know what it's about.
I'd like to welcome to Detroit Black Journal, and I'm sure all of the audience knows, and by now, in the next few minutes, you will know that our guest for tonight is one of the survivors of the struggle of the last 10 years. And I'm welcome to say, and I'm glad that Detroit Black Journal has an opportunity to have someone who has survived and who struggles so diligently for the people throughout this world. That's Bobby Seale.
Thank you.
Okay. You obviously remember those words that you said, and that was in Oakland sometime in the late 60s at Bobby Hutton Memorial Park.
Right.
What's happened since then, Bobby? I mean, what's
going on?
What's going on?
Happened. The struggle in this country, the total movement, it's happened in such a way that, well, I can say this here, the power structure got very slick about early 1970s. See, the power structure learned that over a 12-year period, they attacked the civil human rights aspect, they attacked the political revolutionaries, they attacked even the anti-war movement aspect, and the more they attacked, the more support we got. They got slick and realized suddenly that, let's stop attacking. And suddenly, one day, if you notice, there were no more attacks against any aspects of the movement in this country in the early 70s. That's one thing that's happened. That's what began to take the tide of the struggle in this country to what you call a low tide. Myself, in July 1974, I resigned from the Black Panther Party. And I told Brother Hugh, I said I was going to resign in about 3 to 4 months. And the party at that time had dwindled to something about like, I guess about close to 300 party members in the country.
That's down from, say, 10,000.
Down from 10,000, a peak 10,000 in 1969. In 1969, before I was arrested, put in jail, before the Chicago conspiracy trial occurred, before the murder trial that occurred in New Haven, where I was put up there, at that point, that was a heavy peak of the Black Panther Party.
All right, joining me now is one of Ron Scott's close friends, Dawood Raleed, Executive Director of the Michigan chapter of the Council on American Islamic Relations. Welcome to American Black Journal.
Thank you, Stephen.
You're not dressed like Ron Scott was in those in those clips. Neither am I. The very different times, but somebody who, as you can see there, was always really focused on the people of the city of Detroit, and the struggle against oppression and all of these other sort of tyrannies that that black people and other people suffer in this country.
Oh, no doubt about it. Ron Scott was definitely a pioneer in our community. He actually attended the University of Michigan prior to affirmative action being put in place, being a student activist and one of the few African Americans on that campus back in the 60s. And then he's, you know, as you mentioned, was a co-founder of the Black Panther Party. And one very important thing that Ron worked on that I came to learn about him over the years is that when police brutality was at a epic rate in the city of Detroit, especially prior to Mayor Coleman Young being the mayor, Ron was very instrumental in getting the Police Commission instituted into the city in 1974, in which there would be
citizen voice.
Exactly, a citizen voice over the activities of the Detroit Police Department, which was perhaps the most notorious in the United States of America.
Yeah. It is somewhat ironic that Ron's death happens at the same time we are seeing really vivid images for the first time, I think, of the kind of brutality that he fought against for years. And there's a sense among some people that it may be more frequent now. I think more to the point, it's just more documented. We're seeing it more frequently because everyone's got a camera. And so we're aware of what is going on. Just this week, of course, we have seen more of that kind of issue boil over in Chicago, where the police killed a 16-year-old or a 19-year-old man for apparently no reason. Ron spent his life trying to get people to focus on this.
No doubt about it. And actually, we were together at a protest and a rally early this year in Inkster, related to Floyd Dent, who was brutally beat down by an Inkster police officer, so-called RoboCop. And I remember during that rally that Ron specifically said this has always taken place in our country, but now we have technology of dash cams and police cars, and more importantly, citizen journalism through smartphones are now catching a lot of this violence, like even what just took place recently in San Francisco, where there was a young black man who was shot down with multiple shots by the police department.
What did Ron say was the solution to these problems? I mean, here's somebody who was focused on it for a really long time, saw it change. There's no question we're not dealing with the same thing in the city of Detroit as we were when we had stress before Coleman Young was elected mayor, but we're dealing with different kinds of issues between the police and the community. What did Ron think was the way to solve those?
Well, I heard Ron talk about this multi-pronged. One, he talked about that there needed to be a very deliberate cultural shift inside police departments, and it's not simply about writing policies, but there is a cultural shift that needs to take place, whereas the police department and the blue wall or a curtain of silence has to be broken. This is a cultural thing. He also talked about the very important need that there has to be citizen oversight over law enforcement authorities, and we can't trust the police to police themselves. And as we saw what took place in Chicago with Laquan McDonald, we simply cannot trust the police to police themselves. The third issue, though, that many people don't know about Ron's work is he was leading up an initiative called Peace Zones for Life, which is related to community engagement, as he said, putting the hood back in neighborhood and really for the community to be involved in community policing and the community to be more outspoken and taking more ownership over what's going on in the streets, because at the end of the day, it's the people of the communities that have to be the first line in making sure the community is safe and being functional. It's not just the police job.
Right. I think a lot of people mistakenly characterize this kind of work as anti-police. I think Ron was a really good example of not being anti-police. He was pro-citizen, pro-community, and saw the path to solving these problems as a coming together of the police department and the community, a recognition of the fact that they have to be together, they have to be working as one in order to keep people safe and to keep police from overstepping their bounds.
Definitely, and when Ron was working very closely with our organization in terms of the FBI fatally shooting Imam Luqman Abdullah back in 2009, he was specifically saying that he said, I am not anti-law enforcement, but I am anti-law enforcement misconduct. And this was the message that he put out to the FBI. But I heard him say this many times relating to Saginaw Police, Detroit Police, FBI, or ICE, in which earlier this year, Terrence Cullum was fatally shot by
Border Patrol.
Immigration Customs Enforcement.
Yeah. So what happens to his work now, now that he's gone? What's the way to sort of carry that on in our community?
Well, really, there's going to have to be a group of people and concerned citizens to fill in the gaps. Someone like Ron Scott, who's been involved in this work for over 40 years, his expertise. I don't think
you
there's
don't come by it on the street corner, on every
exactly.
street corner.
There's not really one person that's going to be able to fill his shoes, but there needs to be a group of people who rally around some point and to help energize or try to fill in the gaps of the Detroit Coalition Against Police Brutality, because we know that more than ever that there needs to be a citizen voice in keeping the law enforcement accountable here in southeastern Michigan, and we can't afford to let Ron's valuable work die with him.
Yeah, I mean, he was instrumental recently in getting the police commission reinstated. It was abrogated during the bankruptcy. He and other people spoke out about the need to keep that going. I would imagine that some of those folks will now sort of again rally to that point and keep pushing, because there's more work to do.
There's definitely more work to do, but as I said before, Ron was a person that was down at that police commission meeting every week. He always was bringing up the voice, raising up the concerns of the people. And what many people also don't know is that Ron dealt with so many cases, and a very small, minuscule percentage of the cases that he ran across would ever go public. Many of the cases that he dealt with, he never went to the media, and he tried to mediate these things behind closed door. Exactly.
Yeah. All right. He will be missed. And thank you for being here to remember him.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. That's our program for today. Thanks for watching. You can get more information about our guests at AmericanBlackJournal.org. And as always, connect with us on Facebook and on Twitter. Plus, you can also hear our program on WDET 1019 FM. We'll see you next time.